and welcome to the National Chef of the Year webinar series, which today includes an amazing panel of guests and supporters of National Chef of the Year. I'm David Mulcahy, hosting today's session, and I'm organiser of National Chef of the Year. Now, throughout the pandemic, our resilience, passion, ability to rise to the challenge can be seen by the positive energy of so many across our industry, and none so positive as our guest panel today. I'm going to take this opportunity to talk to our panel about some of the issues facing them and their businesses to give some insight, advice and tips to anyone entering this year's National Chef of the Year. So let's meet our guests. They are Lisa Allen, star of Northcote, Great British Menu and so much more. We have the chef at the Art School Restaurant Liverpool and mentor to so many young chefs, Paul Askew. And we welcome the dynamic and delightful king of the Cinnamon collection of restaurants in London and Oxford, Vivek Singh. And of course, the Padstow powerhouse that is Paul Ainsworth, our truly fantastic chair of judges for National Chef of the Year. Thank you for being with us today, and you're very welcome. Vivek, starting with you, with a group of restaurants, a large team, and the machinery of running a complex business, how have you found the past year? And how are you planning on your reopening?
I'll tell you, I mean, you couldn't have, or we couldn't have, or no one could have made it up if they, in the wildest dreams. Nobody could have seen it coming in terms of what 2020 in its full glory held for us. I mean, we were just simply reacting to the changing, ever-changing scenario all the time. There were lots of challenges around. I mean, there was property, there was rents, there was utilities, there was, big sort of complex business decisions. But I suppose no more important and no more challenging than people themselves. And I think that, the well-being of your teams and just keeping everybody, both sort of having some sort of a certainty or stability, keeping people positive, that was possibly the biggest challenge. In a great measure, that was kind of taken care of by the furlough scheme. I have to give credit where credit's due. That really went a long way in supporting a lot. The other thing was, it was about sort of constant AE, so you adapt and evolve, and you're constantly in that mode where you've got to look for the next idea. And I think a lot of restaurants and lots of chefs and restaurateurs in general have shown amazing amount of adaptability, creativity, innovation, and more importantly, most importantly, generosity. So they've really gone out and helped people, which has been really refreshing and so wonderful to see.
And you're looking forward to reopening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're keeping ourselves busy with meal kits, nationwide meal kits at the moment, which have been an absolute eye-opener, even for somebody like me who's been doing fine dining restaurants for 20 odd years. And I've been turning my nose up at sending a takeaway at the at the end of the street. I now find myself in a situation where I'm sending meal kits up and down the country, and delighted to be able to do that.
Picking up on meal kits, Paul Askew, of course, we've seen many delicious images across social media, etc., with your meal kits and themed events that you've been doing throughout the year. So, how has that helped you keep the morale of your team up and busy?
Yeah, I think just echoing some of the things that Vivek said, really, it's a people business, isn't it? And, the most important thing was to keep the team motivated, keep their well-being, keep them moving and not let them vegetate too much, because hopefully we're gearing up now, aren't we, for a bit of an avalanche with a bit of luck. And I think the at-home boxes have been a great way to do that. We've actually done some cook-along in terms of live stream with some local, professional bodies who wanted to keep their clients engaged. So there's been lots of innovation. We also repurposed our champagne bar downstairs into a little emporium. So we have a little food shop where people can come and buy, whether it's the breads or the pies or sausage rolls or whatever it is that we're making for them, and still buy nice wine and cheese and all the things that we're keeping in stock. So it's definitely been a time of innovation, but it was all about keeping the team busy, keeping engaged with your clients, and just trying to roll with the punches. As Vivek said, it's been such a moving moving feast of problems to deal with.
Paul Ainsworth, from your perspective, you've got a growing business empire, you've got a strong brand across fine dining and casual dining, and you're also very hands-on. So how have you managed to keep, I guess, your spirits up and your morale up as well as that of your team?
That's probably been the biggest focus from day one. Sort of as Vivek alluded to, earlier, that the beginning of it was the most scariest, which was a year's anniversary, because obviously the government had told everybody to stop going out. And then you saw other corporations and big businesses make sort of redundancies like well before furlough. So you then start to look at the people that have been in your business with you right from the beginning, which is 15 years. And you think, is this it? Is this everything that we've built and worked so hard for, right from the ground up, from scratch, are we about to start to lose some of this? But once furlough was announced, and that kind of steadied the ship, I think I always try to point out to people that it steadies one thing. It's quite a major thing, the wages, but there's still so many other outgoings that you have to obviously find the money for, but you've got no income coming in. So the team, because they are the core to everything we do, we've built this kind of collection of businesses based on the quality of the people within them, and they are key to it. They're everything. So your first go-to thing is like, how can we protect the team? How can we make no redundancies? How can we look after them? But again, making no redundancies is just one thing. How do they stay sane? How do they keep their mental health in check? How do they keep their well-being in check? And all I can do, is quite simply is just sort of, try and lead from the top. When we get to May 17th, we've got to look back and go, we did everything we could to be better.
Thanks, Paul. And I guess just moving on, Lisa, obviously, you've taken over the helm of NCOTY. You've been putting your mark and your stamp on the establishment and the food offer, etc. So again, over the past year, how have you taken that time that Paul mentioned and used it to develop yourself, your team, your offer going forward?
Yeah, I think, it's been such an incredible tough time. I mean, the first lockdown was kind of, it was a different impact for people because they'd never been in that situation before. No one knew what to expect. It was kind of that time out, and we discussed with the team, and we also kept in touch with them massively, again, through Zoom, doing quizzes, trying to keep as much information going to them as possible. But that, again, mentally was so different because, everyone was running, doing exercise and different things like that. But the weather was a lot nicer. So that kind of helped that mental attitude for people. And it's something they'd never done before. So they really took advantage of that because, as we know, we are extremely busy people and you're never going to get that time again. And for me, it was spending time with my son. It gave people a real shock when they came back to work. Because from going from 100 miles an hour to nothing and then back to 100 miles an hour again had a real impact on them as and themselves as coming back into the business. And you had to really control that. Whereas this time in this lockdown, when we saw the lockdown come in, we developed a food box. So we went from doing like 50 boxes and then now we actually do 350 boxes a week. Sometimes 500. Last week we sent 400 out, and it's amazing on how people have supported us in that. But now, obviously, as we're gearing up to get back to, the 17th of May, is massive because this time we have so much more knowledge on what is going to happen. Our bookings have gone through the roof, which is amazing. And we're looking for more staff. We're going to bring the staff in structured so they've got time to actually prepare themselves. Than not just coming straight back into the fire again. So it's been a massive kind of learning curve. So I think for me, it was trying to take as much positivity out of it as possible.
If there was one thing that you think, well, actually, I would keep that thing that changed for me, I would maintain that and keep that going forward, what would that be? What would you look at?
You might be the curfew. The curfew actually, at first we were really nervous about it. And I don't, you know, for you guys, whether you saw the same thing, but at number 6, which is the longest experience out of our restaurants, last orders were 7:30. And the difference that made to the team not finishing as late, then going into the following day with a longer sleep, more energy. It was fantastic. And I'm just talking about like our business in particular here with its location. And I just looked at it that we work so hard, don't we? And we have this very short, we're all in our kitchens, and you're working in your kitchen from say 8 o'clock in the morning and you're finishing late at night, but you actually only trade for these small windows. Certainly at a restaurant like number 6, like 12 till 2, and then say 6 till 9:30, which was what it was before the curfew. So what we've done is we've just condensed that opening. So that's something that was completely born out of the pandemic, but actually we saw as a real positive, and we would have probably never have done if it hadn't been for the curfew coming in.
Anybody else going to support the curfew going forward?
I wish we could. I'm not in that boat yet. Not in London and not with the rents we have. But I mean, but Paul makes a very good point. You know, I think what works for London needn't necessarily simply be copied everywhere. No curfews, please, if we can.
Honestly, I've recently heard that they're going to open a museum, a pandemic museum, to start to fill it with things that can show kids, etc., in the future what this was all about. So if you think about, as a panel, if you think about your past year and these historical moments, from food stockpiling and rationing to eat out to help out to meal kits to communities feeding and discovering heroes among us, what would you put into the pandemic museum for people to remember? If I start with Paul Askew, what would you like to see in your pandemic museum?
Thanks for that one, David.
Give the others chance to think.
I think for me, it's probably doing what we're doing right now, the way we communicated through lockdown. You know, we're doing this live stream now, or a Zoom, and I think if we hadn't have had the modern technology going through this terrible year, you know, to keep in touch with our teams, to keep in touch with our clients, to keep in touch with our bank managers, to chase our insurance companies, to do whatever we needed to do. I think, oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine how we'd have got through. And it was tough enough just being on Zooms every day. But I think, you know, certainly technology has helped us hold it together. But if there was something that really came out of it, I think the generosity and the love from the hospitality sector that came through is just amazing. And it's not surprising at all, because by definition, we've got the hospitality gene and we like looking after people. Yeah. And I think, you know, there are so many examples of that across the industry. It made hospitality really stand out for some, you know, a sector that had been beaten up, and yet we were still coming out there and with a smile on our faces and ready to roll once again to the next challenge, you know. So that certainly needed recognition, I think, for the museum. Okay,
so Lisa, what would you put into your museum?
To be honest, I'd probably put a picture of people, of my family, and people like that in there, because at the time of need, when you work, you know, so hard, again, going 100 miles an hour, and you reflect on this, and you need people to turn to, because out of all this, it's massively hit mental health. You know, it's the issues of people really struggling. Some people ask for help, some don't. I think Hospitality Action have done an amazing job about how they're offering out there to say, you know, people can come and talk to us. We can help you. Together, we are a family. Hospitality are family, you know, and it's not someone comes knocking on your door, you're always there trying to help them. For me, family have been a massive part of that, of bringing you together, keeping you sane, you know, and driving you and giving you the confidence to say, fight harder and we will beat this. For me, very much, I think people and family are the biggest focus in all this for me.
Do you know what? I would put my time in National Chef of the Year 2019 to 2021. And when you asked me to do this, I always remember my first thought was, whenever you do something like this, it wasn't just a box to tick to say I was chair of judges. I really, really wanted to bring something to the competition. And I remember chatting with my team thinking, what can we do? How can we make, the rounds different? And then last year when, you were like, look, we're still going to do this. And it's everything I could have ever wanted to do happened because of this, obviously, unprecedented time that we've been through. And for me, one of the biggest achievements last year was the fact that we still did that competition and the way that we did it, and the most incredible things that came out of doing it last year. And I think have now changed the competition for the future. I think the brief and everything that we did and how we did it last year, from tell us about yourself through video and one bite, to this year writing the brief, and the brief being about tell us your story in the last year. That for me, that moment in time of National Chef of the Year 2019 to 2021 was my time being chair of judges, and it was right in the middle of a global pandemic, is something that shows adversity.
In my museum of pandemics, if there's two things, I'd like to put two things. One is, if there is a way of bottling that spirit of generosity that hospitality has shown, and Paul Askew covered it beautifully. I mean, it was brilliant to see an industry on its knees and not necessarily knowing whether it would reopen and what way, shape, or form it would exist if it did survive this. Was still so generous and so innovative and so creative in going out and, whether it was sharing recipes or cooking for the NHS or, whatever it was, the generosity and the spirit was something that has got to be bottled up and put in the museum, one. And my second thing is probably not as positive and not as is I put every expert and every guru that predicted, what was going on and what was going to happen. I put all of that, more like a museum, but in a way to say, look, let's not rely on, other people to tell us what's going to happen, because nobody really has a clue. You've got to find your own sort of mojo in that way, to kind of find your own purpose. And a lot of chefs and a lot of restaurateurs and lots of hospitality people did that. This was an opportunity for the industry to also show, and it has done so brilliantly, to show that it has a heart. And, I'd like to keep these two things in the museum if I can, for posterity, for people to see that hospitality ain't such a bad place after all.
Excellent. Great answers. Thank you for that. Ultimately, I think everybody that is part of this feels that National Chef of the Year isn't just a competition. It's a reflection of our industry, it's a reflection of us, and also that importance of a sustainable future, whether it's sustainable food and eating or the sustainability of us as an industry. And this year, we worked with our headline sponsor to focus on the Knorr Future 50 initiative, which is highlighting some of the most sustainable ingredients and often most underutilized ingredients as well. And Paul, as chair of judges, I know you're passionate about sustainable responsibilities. So can you explain a little bit about why this year's starter course, being vegetarian and featuring Future 50, was so important?
Yeah, so I suppose as we go on, the competition for me this year was, I wanted to create a narrative from the starter right through to the dessert, that basically the chef could tell their story over the past year. And why this worked so brilliantly for the starter was, I myself found that where I was at home all the time, which was amazing, and with my family, that I didn't want to eat meat and fish every single night of the week. And I love vegetables, and I love vegetable cooking. I don't even look at our menu as vegetarian. I look at when we've got a dish of, say, beautiful asparagus on, it's just the same as a dish, of John Dory, or, a lovely piece of lamb. So it was, for me, that was a memory from the past year in lockdown one, like Lisa said earlier, with that lovely weather, that we, quite often we'd be eating like really gorgeous vegetable dishes, like whole baked aubergines, beautiful squashes, lovely salads. And it was light and fresh and delicious. And you can do so much with vegetables. Some of the best restaurants in the world, 3 Michelin star restaurants, are vegetables only. And this for me was a brilliant opportunity to evoke a memory, a personal memory for me, but then ask the chefs to really showcase themselves, not using, meat, fish, game, shellfish, and like, right, show us what you can do with a vegetable, and focusing on those, that brilliant larder that is Future 50. So yeah, that was the inspiration behind the starter and vegetables.
And Vivek, just in terms of that, so how important do you think it's to marry the story of sustainability into the thinking of chefs when they're creating menus?
Completely. I was so thrilled to see us putting a vegetarian starter up front into the National Chef of the Year competition, because I think, for years, it does mark a shift in attitudes. And it's not something that, you need to have only when you really become a top chef or whatever. I think it's something that we've got to see in our younger, chefs coming up through the ranks. They've got to understand sustainability and what's good for the planet, what's good for the customer, what's good for the supplier, the producer, and show the same amount of respect to those ingredients and to the customer as they would to anything else. So I'm really excited to see a vegetarian starter come up, and more importantly, not just vegetarian, but from this sort of Future 50 set of ingredients. And it's a really exciting time, and it's going to bring out. It's something that you haven't been necessarily taught in catering college, so people will, and chefs will, need to kind of dig a little bit deeper, I say, for inspiration and find something.
Great.
Can I just add? Sorry, David. Yeah, that's the other thing as well. Vivek's absolutely spot on. It's this old-fashioned thing, and like you say, it comes from how you're taught that it's always about a protein, and then vegetables have always just been seen as a garnish. And you just, okay, right, I've got my piece of lamb. Like, what can I garnish it with? And it's trying to put out there and remove that and show young chefs that actually stop thinking like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Paul and Vivek on what they've said already. And as you know, we worked with the Future 50 foods ingredients on the Young National Chef competition last year when we were mentoring Edwin, who went on to win. And the challenge is exactly what Paul said. It should be great food, innovative food, imaginative food, whether it's meat, fish, or vegetables. And the fact that we're using lots of nice pulses or unusual squash or ingredients that they may not have been exposed to before, it for me is just fabulous, and it broadens their skill set, their mentality, and just open-mindedness towards food, I think. And I think it's a great thing to have in terms of the brief. And I'm sure there'll be some challenging moments, I'm sure, in the competition, but equally, I'm sure there'll be some amazing recipes that come out of it.
Moving on to the main course, Paul, you shared, we had some good conversations about this, and you shared some very moving stories, really, around how you felt watching boats coming into Padstow, the butchers storing meat when the nation's restaurants were closing down. So do you want to explain a little bit more about that and how it influenced your criteria for the main course?
Yeah, this was happening all around the United Kingdom, and you can imagine in Cornwall how big the fishing industry is in Cornwall and how hard it was hit. Certainly, as well, then when you take the fishing industry, but the fishermen that go out and just get, say, things like lobsters and crabs, because again, a lot of people don't necessarily cook that at home because they're quite challenging. Obviously, lobster being sort of very expensive. But I was inspired with this one by two of our suppliers. So you got Johnny Godden from Flying Fish, and you had Philip Warren, his son Ian, who runs, Philip Warren and Sons. So let's start with Philip and Ian. Ian sort of rang me up literally in bits, head in his hands, like overnight, completely lost all of the trade. Ian's got a huge business that goes into London, supplies some of the best restaurants in the country. and he had about £500,000 worth of stock just sat there with no home for it. But also within their business, also they protect and look after an alliance of farms in Cornwall and Devon. So it just doesn't stop with the meat that was in the fridge. A bit like me with the team, they were like, how can we support these local farmers that have supported us for like all these years? The knock-on effect of not only have they got £500,000 worth of stock in the fridges, they've also got all of these little small farm holdings that supply them this great meat. Then there's the abattoirs and all of that. Then Johnny was the opposite. Johnny had a fridge full of wet fish, and Johnny's a specialist supplier. He just deals with the day boats, selecting the best prime fish going out to all the restaurants sort of around the UK. And I remember Johnny saying to me, do you know what? I managed to get rid of all my fish that I had in my fridge, but I don't know whether I'm going to get paid for it, because everybody was going into this unknown time. So it was just a complete sort of, opposite ends, but both people who were very close to me and good friends in a real sort of predicament. But here we are. Johnny and Ian are still here, still fighting on. They've diversified their business into fish boxes and meat boxes and all sorts going around. And they are gearing up towards kind of the 17th of May. And the inspiration was, let's make a main course that celebrates land and sea. And it was as simple as that. I'm a real sucker. I love a surf and turf dish. I love things like pork belly and scallops and steak and prawns. And I think I've had a brilliant dish by Lisa at Northcote when I was last there that kind of uses that kind of meat and seafood element. And I think some of the greatest dishes that celebrate land and sea are phenomenal. So I thought I think this will give us an absolutely spanking main course challenge.
Great. And it's going to be a fantastic challenge. And so, Lisa, if you were looking at this, how would you approach the main course challenge?
I think, first of all, I think the brief is amazing, because every year you're given a brief and you kind of put into a box because it's a dish that you want to recreate, I don't know, sherry trifle or whatever. But this time it gives them, each individual, to be themselves, using these amazing ingredients out there. So there is a huge larder, a huge sea, a huge butcher shop that you can dive into. For me, it would be coming back to some of my home favourites, maybe, because it is a classic surf and turf, isn't it? And that's been around for years, back in the 80s and the 90s, when people used to cook them all. And it's kind of, I think it's digging deep to put your personality really onto a plate by finding the ingredients that you think are most respected to you, or maybe that you use a lot in your restaurant and you have a close connection with your butcher or your fisherman, and really trying to emphasize and get them to marry up like a marriage and a couple, and using them maybe as one's a sweet, one's a savory, or, because the sweetness of scallops and such a savouriness of pork, like Paul was talking, and really think about the depth of flavour that they both come to together as an exciting challenge, really. I think it's an incredible brief, and I'd really interesting to see how people approach it, as well as putting their own style and their own, their own flair to a plate. The
surf and turf or land and sea combinations are just adorable. I'm a big fan of Basque country food, and it's all about what's coming out of the sea on the day, what's most seasonal in your region, and for us, I'm based on the Wirral, and we shop around from the whole of the northwest and the north tip of Anglesey and North Wales as well. So we get lots of lovely clams and cockles and razor shells and things like that, as well as great lamb, great hogget, great beef. So it would probably be some sort of combination with there, and you look at this things like the salt marsh lamb nibbling on the samphire, and then you put in them with some cockles and clams, or so. It's just magical, when you got those two things together. I know Paul's nodding because it's one of his signatures, isn't it?
I love it. It's brilliant. Like when Lisa was talking, and the way you're interpreting it, it's like, it's a dream come true. You're making me even more passionate about it. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, it was fantastic, and you know, whether it comes from the banks of the River Dee and on the Wirral, or whether it comes from Cornwall or Morecambe Bay, and or wherever it comes from, you know, it's just getting those combinations and really, as Lisa said, putting your personality and your heart and soul on that plate. You know,
if you took spices and fragrant ingredients for a meat and fish or seafood based dish, that would be amazing. Obviously, you know, you can bring an awful lot of new dimension to the product. Do you have an example of a meat and fish combination that works for you, that you have on your menu, or that you feel is a great marriage?
Well, you know, this is not something that you find traditionally in Indian cooking, but in terms of pushing the boundaries and, you know, kind of just trying to create new experiences for people to take away, there are examples and there are dishes. For example, for me, a lamb kebab and oyster. A lamb seekh kebab cooked in tandoor, really smoky, really juicy, really tiny, and a really cold sort of, you know, chilled oyster with it. It's a really good one. We have recipes of venison cooked in a rock moss and, you know, like in Guinness sauce, and a prawn cooked in cardamom, and the two together go way, way beyond what most people would imagine unless you've tried it. So, you know, I mean, just opening up spice to any of these combinations, it opens up, you know, like 100 more doors in terms of permutations.
That's brilliant. Sounds delicious. Paul, the main course, drawing attention to these food heroes is significant and perfectly timed as we come out of this. So it's fantastic and exciting. And of course, the menu can't finish without a dessert. And when Paul and I were having our brainstorming kind of Zoom calls there a few weeks ago, we talked about the baking frenzy that hit the UK, you know, over the last year. It gripped the nation, all about home cooking, home baking, and the sourdough frenzy and all of that. And Paul did a straw poll while we were on the call with his team around him, and he asked them to name the dessert or sweet treat that came to mind to them. And I could just hear shouts of brownies, banana breads, Victoria sponges, crumbles, pies, all in a chorus behind. And it was a very highly scientific poll, clearly, which formed the basis of the dessert. And before I asked Paul to explain a little bit more about that dessert, I thought we should carry out a little straw poll ourselves and ask the panel for your desert island pudding choice and why. So let's start with Vivek. What would your go-to dessert be that sums you up maybe over the last year?
Oh, you know, we all experienced the shortages that we did, you know, in the way that it did. I mean, there were days when, you know, you couldn't find sugar for love or for money because everything was gone. There were other days you couldn't find flour. But the one particular dessert that kept me sort of company throughout the week, and I was drawn more to it than last year than I ever have been in my life, was the kheer, the rice pudding. You know, so when you have nothing else and can't think of anything, you always have milk. We had milk and we had a bit of rice, a few pods of cardamom and tons of sugar. It was a brilliant way of both comforting and, you know, it was just so simple to do. In half an hour on the hob, there you have something, you know, so comforting. And comfort is what we were all looking for at the time. And when mangoes were in season, I'd chuck a bit of mango in it. So, you know, rice pudding, mango, cardamom. I tell you.
What about in the Wirral? What about up in the Wirral, Paul? What was your go-to dessert?
Well, when I was reading the brief, it's all about sort of conjuring up those emotions from your childhood, I think, as well, isn't it? And maybe something you sat around the table with your family and had on a Sunday. I mean, my mum was big for you know, the crumbles and pies, and big rhubarb fans. And of course, it depends on the season. I know that the competition will be in October, so I'm assuming they'll go towards apples and pears and maybe some darker fruits there to you know, add a bit of another dimension to it. But for me, the thing that always reminds me of family and things is my mum's tipsy trifle. So if you got, and obviously with a large amount of sherry in my family, But what you can do with that, the flavors, or whether you take it down the apple and pear route or whether you take it down a red berry route, is down to the competition, isn't it? And I think the reinterpretation of these wonderful classics is, I mean, I just love seeing the innovation and seeing how people, take it to another level. And that's what it should be about. Great.
And Lisa, what about you? What's your dessert?
Well, thinking about it, we had a lot of home cooked, trifles and crumbles and pies and stuff like that. But for me, if you're going on what is humbling to you, recently I I lost my father, and it's been such an incredible, completely hard time for all of us. And when you look back at things, I look at inspirations, and for me, I love reinventing those classics because they do bring a lot of those humbling times that you have together as family. And one of the things that I would do would be an apple pie, because I can remember my dad was a very, very big sweet tooth, and at some point he just didn't like apple pie. He couldn't get his head around stewed apples. But in the restaurant once, we recreated apple pie, and I can remember him saying to me, he said, do you know what, Lisa? He said, I love apple pie now after you made me that. And for me, it's bringing back memories. So I would definitely do an apple pie. But for people out there, again, it's about linking those connections, but really tugging at those seasons as well. Like Paul said, there's apples, there's pears, there's plums and stuff that are all around at that time of year. But yeah, definitely, I love those kind of classic traditional things because you really can put your own spin onto it and your own twist.
Great, and that just leaves Paul. So Paul, would you like to maybe use that brilliant backdrop to explain the criteria?
Yeah, it's funny. First of all, sorry to hear that, Lisa. And it's the same for me. My memory is from my dad. My desert island dessert would also be apple pie. My dad was from Lancashire, and I grew up with if we did have dessert, it'd be a lump of apple pie with a real nice piece of cheese. And down south, where I was brought up, that was really weird. I'd go around friends' houses, and when you're about 10 years old and you start going around your mates, and they're having vanilla ice cream and squirty UHT cream, and I'm asking for a piece of cheese. It's a combination now because of my dad and a memory to my dad that we have on it, number 6. So that would be my desert island dish. The competition, as you say, we were brainstorming, and if you remember, David, it started with my first thought was lockdown 1. Immediately there was a flour shortage. So that's where we started. Then we did our poll. And then I thought the story, which Lisa, you'll sort of resonate with, one of the Great British Menu banquets, I was sat next to Matthew Fort, and Matthew is one of the most amazing kind of food brains, and he's just so inspiring to talk to. And at the time I was about to open the Mariners, and I was telling him how I wanted it to be like a proper pub and all of this. And Matthew just started reeling off all of these great British puddings, and just how that we're so brilliant at these puddings in this country, but we're almost at the same time underrated, and we don't sort of celebrate them. And it sort of took me back to working for, the late, great Gary Rhodes, and how he really celebrated the great British dessert. So it was then inspired by sort of the flour shortage and all the baking that everyone did, sort of with then this hybrid of well, actually, let's celebrate the brilliant desserts of this country, because right now it's all about us getting back on our feet and just how brilliant we are in Britain, and not going anywhere near the dreaded B word that is Brexit. But do you know what I mean? It's great British puddings, and as Paul and Vivek and Lisa have alluded to, there's so many things that you can do. And again, a bit like the main course, rather than sort of saying, give us a tart or give us a Pacific dish, a bit like last year, just give me strawberries and cream. However you interpret strawberries and cream, do it. And this is what this is like. And I think when you give people a story, when you give these chefs something to hold on to, I feel that then the imagination and the creativity is going to go through the roof, because we've all been through especially chefs, how, like we've all said in this conversation, how hard our industry's been hit. And we're all we've all got a story to tell, and we've all been through our own story. So again, give us a great British, pudding, because there's literally tons of them that you can do. And what a great time of the year to be doing it, with the darker fruits, the apples, the pears. There's just so much to choose from.
Now, it makes for 3 courses of a menu that tells a story in different ways across different, times of the pandemic, and as you say, from childhood right through. So this is going to be something else for chefs to embrace. And Vivek, just a brief question. National Chef of the Year has been going for just under 50 years now, and continues to discover new talent. So why, in your view, is it important for chefs to enter?
Well, I think all you've got to do is to look at the alumni from the last, 15, 20, whatever, 20 years. And you know that you're instantly in very good company. So in terms of motivation, any young chef, young or old, or it doesn't matter who it is, anybody who's looking to make a mark and, really looking to push themselves. And I'm not necessarily just about winning or losing. But if you really want to just push yourself and see where you're at, I think this is one of the greatest competitions in the country, and has been for some time. So anybody who's serious about their career and really want to do, I always encourage them to go and participate, enter, because you don't enter, you can't get in. You can't get in, you don't cook. But just if you're interested in your career and yourself and pushing and furthering your own sort of knowledge base. This is a great competition to apply.
Great. And I guess Lisa and Paul Askew, you've been, not just supporters of National Chef of the Year, but have been mentors to winners of Young National Chef of the Year. In Paul's case, the current Edwin Cook, and a few years ago, Danny Young from Northcote. So this is the senior competition element. And we want to see chefs from all backgrounds, all genders entering. So what would you say to chefs looking to take on this challenge? Lisa, to start with you.
I'm very big at putting the younger ones and even the older ones, putting them through competitions. It is a very hard thing, and it can be quite daunting. But so it's very rewarding and very challenging at the same time. And it's about kind of digging deep, really reading the brief, collaborating your thoughts, and getting as much information and help from others around you. Mentoring is massive. It's giving them the confidence to actually go out there and say, this is me and this is what I want to cook, and being confident in what you come up with, and delivering it. And not all the time do you win, but it's about taking part that makes it, and next time it might be the third time before you win it. But it's the experience, it's the exposure, it's getting around all these people that are the ambassadors and the greatest of this industry. And once you're in there, you will get so much from information, help, and from all these people around you. So it's taking part that counts. And if you've got the courage, the passion, and the force to deliver excellence.
Well, I think the Young National Chef competition is a pathway, isn't it? It's the beginning of your journey, and I think the process of going through from competing in the regional competitions through to semi-final, through to hopefully final and beyond, just doing that alone makes you a winner, and the confidence and the change in the personalities that you see as they grow is just, it's unbelievable. There's no value you can place on that, really. But my hope is that people like Danny from Northcote and Ed, who just won this year, will now go on to compete at the senior level, because it's only one step of the journey. And we really want to see these guys moving forward and opening their own places, or being part of incredible stories in the future. And it's placing them at the heart of it, so that our industry is strong as we come out of this. And the competition has done so many great things in so many different ways. We'd need another webinar to talk about all of that. Long may it continue, is what I say.
Absolutely. And Paul Ainsworth, the entries are open now. You've designed another fantastic brief, and we obviously want to celebrate the industry, but also encourage male, female, all backgrounds, all genders and all cultures to be part of this. So what would you say as your message to chefs entering the competition, and also chefs supporting others to enter the competition?
Just go for it. You know, you get one shot at things, and the biggest thing I think that I see in National Chef of the Year is the journey that you go on. I think what makes this competition brilliant as well. It doesn't feel that it's just all about the winning. It's the learning and the experience and the people you're going to meet. And do you know what I mean? Like, Lisa, Paul, Vivek, Tom Kerridge, Sat Baines, Claude Bozzi, Claire Smith, they're all stood there, and they're not there to intimidate you. They're there to mentor you. You're effectively getting free mentoring, like, as you go, and they'll have conversations with you and they'll talk to you. And, it's like Paul just said there about Edwin, about exposing yourself to different things, and just kind of get that application, be really serious about it and give yourself another life experience. National Chef, it's not just about entering, cooking some dishes and like, oh, I didn't win. You look at the final 10, that made it into the final, like every single one of them, it's an amazing day. And yes, there always has to be a winner. And of course, that competitiveness in you, of course you want to win. You're in it to try and win it. But do you know what? For me, I've never seen a competition that you get so much out of the competition. It's not just about that final moment of winning. It's the journey that you go on, what you expose yourself to, from ingredients to life experiences, to the people you're going to meet. And then, you know what, if you don't get to the final, if you don't get to the final 10, if you don't win it, you come back, you try again, and you build and you grow. And that would be my big message to anyone entering this. It's so much more than just that final part of the winning. It's the journey you go on with it. And it's and that's not a cliche. It's the truth. I've seen that with my own eyes, and I think it's phenomenal. Young chef or seniors, it's brilliant at that. That would be for me the biggest reason to enter. It's the same as going on a big stage somewhere and doing a stage at a restaurant that you really want to go, and you're doing a sabbatical. Look at it like that, as a bit of a sabbatical, and just going on a brilliant, crazy ride.
Absolutely. And of course, for anyone listening today, the entries are open. Everything that you need to know is online, and it's really about now taking that plunge. And as all our panelists have said, it's about taking that passion that you've got and that commitment and seeing it through. And all along the way, the support is there, the help is there, the mentorship is there. And we're just going to be looking forward to a fantastic final this year. But right now, from a National Chef of the Year point of view, our focus is going to be on getting record numbers of entries and to make sure that we see them through and support them along the way. And I have no doubt that we will have an exciting, invigorating final for 2021. And young and senior Chef of the Year competitors will be remembered for their sportsmanship and talent for years to come. I think as we come to the end of this fascinating conversation, which could have gone on for hours, you've heard from an amazing panel, and I'd like to thank Lisa, Paul Askew, Paul Ainsworth, and Vivek Singh for your time, your insight, your advice, and of course, your endless support for National Chef of the Year. To anybody watching, do not forget there is plenty of time to enter, but don't delay. Make that commitment, give yourself the time it takes to go through that amazing brief and really make the best of what you are and show yourself for what you are as a chef and a cook this year. So in the meantime, stay safe and happy cooking. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you for everything, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.